Hey everybody, it's Mom 2 After 1. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video and coming back to my channel. As you can see from the title of the video, we're here to discuss episode 2 of the Netflix docuseries Mr. McMahon, all about Vince McMahon, the man behind the success and the grandeur and the popularity of the World Wrestling Entertainments. Worldwide Entertainment? World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, formerly known as WWF. So, if you haven't seen my synopsis of episode 1, feel free to pause this video, open a new tab on your computer, and go back to YouTube and find my episode 1 recap, and then you can watch that, and then you can come back here, press play again, and finish watching me talk about this. But before I talk about the episode, before I get into it, make sure you like this video, share this video with people who might care, and comment below, and subscribe to my channel. I mean, why not? So one thing I did say in my synopsis of episode 1 was that I was really hoping that episode 2 would get more into personal life of Vince McMahon, more about his family life and how he felt about this, and more conversations with his family members about how they felt when they saw him do this and this and this. And we did not get that in episode 2. So I was really disappointed by that. Episode 2 was just more of kind of the same. Like the first episode ended with WrestleMania 1. Episode 2 dealt with WrestleMania 2, 3, 4, 5. I was like, okay, and granted, I know that this is what he does. I know he is known for wrestling. So I understand that wrestling is going to be like 85 to 90% of what this documentary is about. But the remaining 10 to 15%, I want to actually know about Vince McMahon, the man. I was kind of disappointed by that. But the episode starts with, I don't even know what it is. It looks like a Vegas show almost. There are all these dancing girls. There are all these wrestlers playing instruments in the background. And then Vince McMahon comes out and he's wearing a tuxedo. He is singing. He is dancing. He is gyrating. I don't know what the heck is going on. I'm so confused. I still don't know to this day what exactly that was. But the episode is called Heat because, in addition to the success of WWF and them gaining popularity and making all this money from all these WrestleManias, selling thousands upon thousands of tickets to these events, having all the celebrities come and all that stuff, there's a lot of heat coming his way. One of the things that was an issue was the wrestlers were working pretty much 7 days a week, 52, 7 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year with like no union representation, right? So they don't have any medical protection. There's no law or no union there to say, okay, well, they can only work this amount of days, this amount of time. They were just kind of working themselves to the ground. And obviously, if you don't wrestle, you don't get paid, you don't work. So one of the wrestlers, Jesse Ventura, tried to start a union and he got some people to come like to a secret meeting. Vince McMahon found out about it, and basically, actually, before he found out about it, one thing I did learn about episode 2, Hulk Hogan is a snitch. He's a snitch, and he's like kind of loyal, but not really loyal. So he claims, I'm loyal to Mr. McMahon, I'm loyal to Vince. Of course, I went and told Vince about the union thing. It's like a union is not a bad thing. The union is really there just to protect the wrestlers. But once Hulk Hogan found out about it, he snitched on all the fellow wrestlers and told Vince McMahon about it. Mr. McMahon told all of them, look, if you choose to go through with this union thing, you're fired, you don't have a job anymore. So the union thing did not take off, at least at that time. I'm assuming they have one now, hoping they have one now. But as of that time, it just kind of fell in the water, which I was like, Hulk Hogan is a terrible person. But let me see, I took some notes, guys. I was trying to be professional with this. So yeah, I talked about the union. The wrestlers were exploited. WrestleMania 2 was the flop, essentially. They made a bunch of money, but he was like, oh, WrestleMania 1 was so amazing. Let's do even bigger with WrestleMania 2. Let's have WrestleMania be in 3 different cities, which didn't make any sense because obviously this is back in the 80s. So technology back then is not what technology is now. Now you can pull up a screen now and watch 4 different football games happening in 2 different time zones and be perfectly fine. That technology did not exist in the 1980s. So of course it was a flop and it didn't make any sense. But in Michigan, WrestleMania 3, they build Andre the Giant against the Hulk. And watching that take place, or watching the lead up to that taking place, the main thing I thought was, you know what? This makes sense. Vince McMahon, at the end of the day, he is like his father. It seems like that he's all about the money, he's all about the business. Andre the Giant had just come off of doing the movie The Princess Bride. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that movie. That's actually a pretty cute, quirky movie. But he was in that movie and he retired from wrestling because he was having a lot of back problems. There's a back surgery he should have gotten. He chose not to get it. He chose to kind of just retire and kind of relax. Vince McMahon convinced him to get the back surgery, to come back to wrestling just because it would be this huge feat to have him wrestle Hulk Hogan. And it was a huge feat. A lot of people came out. This WrestleMania took place in Michigan, and they had freaking Aretha Franklin in there playing the piano and like singing America the Beautiful. It's like, what? That was so random to me. And like I said, it was a big draw, but I'm sure Andre the Giant, well, he's passed on now. He's gone. I don't know if he's gone on to glory, but wherever he's gone, he ain't here no more. And, I'm sure he probably regrets that. Like, yeah, I've really injured my health, or I sacrificed my health just to do this whole wrestling thing. I'm sure he got paid a lot of money. Like, I know that. But Vince McMahon did not care about that man's health. He was just like, oh, this would be a big draw for wrestling, and this will give us all a lot of money. And again, at the end of the day, he's a businessman. That's what business people do. So I don't blame him for that. I'm not mad at him for that. I'm not surprised. I'm really not. I don't know anything about the man, but I'm not surprised. That's pretty much seems like that's who he is. Who he was in the 80s seems like that's who he is now as well. And one thing I did note, I love that when Vince refers to Hulk Hogan, he does not say Hulk. He calls him Terry, which is Hulk's government name. So it definitely gave me the same vibe as if you guys are getting older, it gives me the vibe of the relationship between Barry Gordy and Smokey Robinson at Motown. The only difference is I think Barry Gordy and Smokey Robinson are actual friends. And even though Barry Gordy is the one who started everything and Smokey kind of came under him and he helped him out a little bit, I feel like they're more on equal ground now and have just mutual respect for each other. I don't think Vince and Hulk Hogan necessarily have that, but just the way the two of them were kind of shifting the gears of what wrestling looked like and shifting the gears of WWF and the whole Hulkamania thing, and everyone said it, and even Hulk Hogan said it. It's like everything that I said and I did came from Vince McMahon. Every idea he had, endorsements he said I should go after, shows that I should go after, I followed his advice to the T, and everything worked out for me because he had amazing ideas. And so it was like Vince was almost the puppet master. And the couple times that Hulk Hogan didn't listen to him, didn't turn out well for him you know. But so I kind of got that parallel a little bit, but again, I don't think they're actual friends. I think it's just about that mutual respect for the business and about making money together. But I don't think there was actual friendship there. But I did kind of think about that a little bit watching it. So one of the things that's called the heat for this episode, so one of the things that came up is the steroid scandal. And obviously, if you're dealing with any kind of sport, especially if there's a documentary that's revolving around the sport, you're always going to hear something about steroids. So apparently, there was this doctor who was there um, at all the wrestling matches, and he was there kind of taking care of the wrestlers. So what Vince McMahon was saying is that selling steroids at that time was not illegal. So selling steroids to athletes was not illegal. What was illegal was prescribing steroids to these wrestlers and then charging them for it. That wasn't right. So doctor went on trial, and of course he's snitching. He's telling everybody's business, and Hulk Hogan was one of the people who took some steroids. Vince McMahon knew this. Vince McMahon said, I took steroids too. He's like, I don't anymore, but I used to take steroids as well. Vince McMahon has a very large build. So that makes sense. Hulk Hogan went on the Arsenio Hall show, and Vince McMahon told him, I don't think it's a good idea to go on the show. We're in the midst of all this stuff. But if you choose to go, just be honest. Tell him the truth. Like, tell him, yeah, I did steroids. It was a dumb thing. I'm not going to do it again. He's like, but say something. Just tell the truth. Hulk Hogan didn't listen. Hulk Hogan decided to lie. Like, no, I never took steroids. Like, I don't know what he's talking about. That was never me. And of course, all this stuff came to light because the doctor's like, yeah, I shot him up 3, 4 times myself. And other people said, oh, I saw Hulk Hogan do all this stuff. So that didn't bode well for him. And essentially, there were all of these cases that were mounting against Vince McMahon. It was stuff about steroids, about sexual harassment. There was a pedophilia ring, apparently. They had something called ring boys, where you had these young boys who would help to break down the ring in between matches at like WrestleMania and like big matches like that. And so there was this whole allegedly, one of a reporter actually from the Wall Street Journal was writing all of these scathing articles about all the scandals. And so the idea was that these ring boys were being molested and perhaps raped by higher ups at the company. So not necessarily the wrestlers, but by some of the actual executives were doing it. So you have all of that happening. Again, in addition with the steroids, in addition to a woman was like the first female referee. So she claimed that Vince McMahon raped her. And another note that I made is that she went on Geraldo and she's telling her story. And then some of the people in the audience who are asking her questions, especially men, are like, so why are you doing this now? Like, is this for money? Do you hope to get this out of it? And it just reminded me of, and unfortunately this still happens, but especially in the 80s and the 90s, it was very it wasn't very common for women to stand up and say, this man did this to me. This woman perhaps did this to me. I felt this type of way. Like now we have the Me Too movement and more people are coming out and more comfortable doing it. This does not exist back in the day. And it reminded me of like the Anita Hill trial with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and just how women were not believed back in the day. And again, unfortunately, a lot of women still are not believed now. So it reminded me of that. And obviously, we don't know what's true and what's not true. We do know at the end of the day, Vince McMahon paid a lot of these people off and settled a lot of stuff out of court. That doesn't necessarily mean that he is guilty, but don't mean that he's not guilty either. So in the midst of all of this scandal happening, Hulk Hogan decides to leave WWF. He retires. He decides that he's going to go to acting, become an actor, and just focus on that part of his career. He hated it, but he was like, "There's just a lot of drama going on. I don't want to do this." But one thing he told Vince McMahon is, "I'm not going to be your competition. I'm just going to leave wrestling altogether." That's what he told him before he left. So at the time of this, we have WWF, which is obviously the number one thing smoking. It's the biggest wrestling federation in the world. And the number two was WCW, which was World Championship Wrestling, ran by Ted Turner, who at that time was married to Jane Fonda. Y'all probably asking who are all these names. Ted Turner was a big person in the TV, cable world. He just owned a bunch of networks, owned the other stuff too, but he was primarily known for owning a bunch of networks, and he was just a very, very rich guy. So he owned WCW at the time, and one of the people who worked for him, once they heard Hulk Hogan retired, they were like, "Yo, we're number two, we're not doing bad, but it'd be a really great pull. We can convince Hulk Hogan to come join us." And one thing that WCW offered that WWF didn't is that because Hulk Hogan had already built this reputation, they allowed him to set his schedule. He was like, I'm tired of working every single day, not having any breaks. I want to be home with my family. So they asked him point blank, okay, how often do you want to work? 3 days a week? Cool. How often are you willing to travel? This amount of time? Cool, we can do that. How much do you want? Boom. They basically gave him everything he wanted. And my man jumped ship. And I was like, it just not that I ever had a high opinion of Hulk Hogan. Like, let's be very clear. Hulk Hogan has never been like a person where I'm like, oh my gosh, I admire him. He's so amazing. He's great. I'm almost positive that he said some racist stuff recently, or not recently, or some racist clip that came out recently. I don't know. I've never cared about him. I've never had a set opinion of Hulk Hogan. But in this documentary, this episode 2, he is a snitch and he is not loyal. And I was just like, huh, okay. I guess, sure. So he goes over to WCW. He's living his life. And then the feds call him to testify in the steroids case. And they basically are trying to tell him, like, this is what we want you to say, because they're trying to indict Vince McMahon by any means necessary. But telling Hulk Hogan, either you tell the courts, tell them exactly what we're telling you to tell them, or we're going to turn the investigation to focus on you as a person who bought and took all them steroids, and you could face up to 17 years in prison. So again, you have this going on, sexual assault is happening, and some of the wrestlers are talking about how terrible the women were treated, the women were abused left to right, sideways, and it's just not looking good, obviously, for Vince McMahon. And so it kind of ends before anything's really resolved. I mean, they have some writing after the episode is over, like, oh, Vince McMahon ended up paying this person this amount of money. Like one of the women, I don't remember the referee, but one of the women who claims that he raped or assaulted her, I believe essentially when she went on Geraldo, Vince McMahon tried to sue her and Geraldo for defamation of character. He dropped the suit. And then years later, he ended up paying her some money, like paying her a settlement. So I'm like, again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty, but it doesn't look like you're innocent in this either. And his son is interviewed, his daughter is interviewed, his wife wasn't interviewed in this particular episode. She was interviewed in the first episode. I still don't know who this man is. I don't know who Vince McMahon Jr. is. I know who Vince McMahon, the face of WWE, is. Like, I'm learning more about him as a businessman, and he was very shrewd, calculating, but he had a vision. He didn't pigeonhole himself. He seemed to be really good at getting all eyes on his company by any means necessary, right? So, from a business standpoint, genius, right? I'll give him credit for that. But I still don't know who this man is. Like, it's almost like You read a document and read a document. You read somebody's biography and say the person is 60 years old. The book starts though when they're 20 and it goes from 20 to 60. It's like things that happened to you in your childhood, the way you grew up, the relationship you had with your parents or your siblings, all of those things, they're like such huge defining moments that determine and dictate why you do the things you do now in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And not having that background, it, at least for me, as a person who's an avid documentary watcher, it brings about more questions than answers. And it doesn't help probably that I'm a former reporter, so I'm just used to asking questions. It's just what I do. So I can clearly see that there is a strong connection and a strong urge, I guess, to still make his dad proud, even though at this point his father has passed away. I feel like everything that Vince McMahon has been doing right after his dad passed and right before his dad passed is all about making money, but essentially just making his father proud and make sure his father never regrets his decision to sell his company to his son. And it's like, mind you, I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist, none of that. But it's like a little boy is still inside Vince McMahon who was still looking for his daddy's approval. And even though his daddy's passed away and can't give it to him, every decision he makes, he hopes his father somehow knows about it, somehow sees it, and is somehow smiling wherever he is that, wow, my boy took WWF and he took it to Madison Square Garden. He took it to Michigan and sold 78,000 tickets. He took it to network TV. He turned it into this TV show. He turned it into merch. He turned it into. That's what I'm getting, but it would be nice if instead of me assuming that or guessing that, we had someone being interviewed, like, let's say, a psychologist or a therapist. Let's say, again, someone else from his family. Like, again, they have his wife and his two kids, but it's like, those are the only people in your family. Like your kids only know you as Vince McMahon, the wrestling person, so they can only speak to your life from that point on. Your wife knew you before that, but all she talks about is, yeah, when he bought the business from his dad, this is what happened. She doesn't even talk about like, what she was thinking when she first married him. Why did she marry him? How did they court each other? How long did they date before they got married? Again, how they felt when they had their first children. How does he feel about his children being involved in the business? Did he force them into that like his dad did? Like, all that is unclear. And again, I know that 85 to 90% of this documentary is going to be about wrestling. I know that. I understand that. I'm fully prepared for that. But I need more, And I said it the last episode, and I'll say this episode too. What I want to see in episode 3, I want to see more. I don't want it to be so linear. We've gone through WrestleManias 1 through like 6. We don't necessarily say I don't necessarily need to see WrestleMania 7 starting off episode 3. I don't need that to be the focal point is WrestleMania 7, 8, 9. Like, switch it up a little bit, go back and talk about some of the personal stuff. Or switch gears altogether, have one episode all about women wrestlers and how they were introduced and how you made them bigger and how you intermingled them with the men wrestlers and, something. So I don't know what's going to happen with episode 3. I really don't know. And I still don't even remember if it's 6 or 8 episodes. It's more than 5. I know that much. But I'm going to keep watching, keep hoping that I learn more. But if I get to the last episode and I still don't know anything about him personally, I'm going to be really upset. And the last time I was upset when I read a bio. I read Lenny Kravitz's biography, and it followed a chronological order, but I was pissed because the book ends with him coming out with his first album and his daughter Zoe Kravitz being born. That woman is in her 30s. And he had so much more music after that. He got into acting. He had the divorce from Lisa Bonet. None of that is covered in his biography. And the biography didn't come out like when Zoe Kravitz was born. The biography came out in the past like 10 years. So there's plenty of stuff that you could and should have written in there that you did not. And I was just upset. Like, who told you to end here? This is a weird place to end. And so I'm really hoping that this documentary doesn't disappoint me. I'm really hoping that it is well rounded because I've watched plenty of sports documentaries. I watched one on Yogi Berra. I could care less about baseball, but I watched one on Yogi Berra because I was like, oh, I know he's a famous person. Let me look at it, and it was well rounded. It talks about baseball, obviously, but it talks about him as a kid, him as a dad, him as a father, talks about life after baseball, it talks about a lot of things. Because again, Vince McMahon, yes, he is the face of WWF, but he is also Vince McMahon Jr., who did not meet his biological father until he was 12 years old, who lived with his mother in a trailer park, and his abusive stepfather, who's been married to his wife for however many decades, though he's constantly been cheating on her apparently, and who has two kids who are heavily involved in the WWE lifestyle. That's what I know. But there's so many holes there. And I need the documentary to fill in those holes. I really need that. But that's episode 2. I don't feel like I learned a lot about him. I learned, like I said, the things that I saw, I kind of knew. And I feel like they go with the character I've created in my head of who Vince McMahon is. Just again, a shrewd businessman who's all about the money. So make sure you got the money, making sure that the name of WWE is on everybody's mind still all these years later, making sure his superstars are really superstars and doing whatever it takes to make sure all eyes are on him. Like that's what he does, that's what he did. None of that stuff surprises me. The whole Hulk Hogan thing, I don't think I realized how big of an influence he was in the beginning of WWF. And I learned a little bit about his character, but again, I didn't have high regard for him before this started, so that literally did nothing for me. So I don't want to say I'm disappointed. I feel like it's too early to say that I'm disappointed, but I'm just hoping, and I'm going to be hopeful that I'm going to see something different, that I'm going to see a little more than what I have seen so far. But that's episode 2, you guys, called Heat. Again, we're watching the Mr. McMahon documentary. Feel free to watch along with me. I'm gonna I just finished watching the second episode. Well, I finished watching it yesterday before I recorded this. So I'm gonna get through the rest of the episodes. And I'm gonna do a video for each and every one. And hopefully it gets better. But feel free to watch along with me. Comment below. Share this video with wrestling enthusiasts who have or have not seen the documentary. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and like this video when you get a chance. And I'll see you guys soon. Peace.